Coming to your seated posture. Sitting in a chair, arms by your side, half lotus or full lotus. Taking that deep breath in through the belly, engaging the diaphragm, filling up the lungs, retaining the breath, and slowly exhale as you contract the ribs and let out the last bit of breath as you pull that belly button in towards the spine. Taking another deep breath. Slowly exhale, allowing each breath to get heavier and heavier as you sink into your meditation. Continuing with part 5, last section of last of the highlights of Talking to Strangers, written by Malcolm Gladwell. We go into the Kansas City experiments. These were conducted in the 1970s, and it was O.W. Wilson who believed that preventive patrol could decrease crime. He said that police cars in unpredictable motion would deter crime. He hired George Kelly, a criminologist, and he implied he had 15 police beats that were divided into 3 groups. One group was the control group, where everything stayed the same as usual. The second group was going to have no preventive patrol at all, and police would only respond when called. And the third group would double or sometimes triple the patrol in the area. After a year of experimentation, the results showed no change at all in criminal activity. In the 1990s, they decided to give a new criminologist a chance, Lawrence Sherman, and he had different methods that he wanted to try. The first experiment was having police officers go door to door, visit with the community, get to know them, discuss with them the impact of guns in the area, and basically give them flyers on, who to call if you see somebody with a gun. They went to 858 doors. Only 2 calls came in, and they were about guns in another neighborhood. It basically came down to the fact that the problem was that these individuals never left their houses, so they didn't know where the guns were. The second experiment was to train officers in the subtle art of spotting concealed weapons. After doing this for a while, they had hired Robert Gallagher to come and train, but apparently none of his ideas were transferable because absolutely no guns were spotted on individuals while this experiment was conducted. The last experiment, however, broached on the Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment protects citizens from unreasonable searches and seizures. On the street, however, a police officer must have reasonable suspicion to frisk you. But if you are in your car, that standard is not hard for a police officer to meet. Traffic codes give police officers hundreds of reasons to stop a motorist. Once stopped, they are allowed to search the car as long as they believe the motorist might be armed or dangerous. So Sherman's proposal was to detail 4 officers in 2 squad cars to District 144. They were told not to stray outside of the area. They were free from all other calls and duties. They worked every night from 7 p.m. to 1 a.m. for 200 consecutive days. They were to watch out for suspicious-looking drivers, use pretext to pull them over. If still suspicious, search the car and confiscate any weapons they could find. Outside of District 144, crime remained as bad as ever. Inside District 144, gun crimes were cut in half. In 1991, the New York Times ran a front page story on the miracle in Kansas City. Larry Sherman said his phone was ringing off the hook. 300 plus police departments around the country bombarded him with requests of information on how he had done it. One by one, other local forces followed suit. For example, North Carolina state troopers went from 400,000 stops to 800,000 stops in the span of 7 years. Drug Enforcement Agency, immigration officials, and others started to apply the Kansas City-style traffic stop. All tried to replicate the miracle in District 144. Keyword being tried, because in the transition from Kansas City to the rest of the country, something crucial in Lawrence Sherman's experiment was lost. Sherman had previously worked with Weisberg in Minneapolis, establishing the law of crime concentration we discussed last week. They talked together for a time at Rutgers, where their department chair, Ronald Clark, who had done some pioneering work on suicide. These three all pursued the same principal idea of coupling. And what was the principal implication of coupling? It was that law enforcement didn't need to be bigger, it needed to be focused. The lesson the law enforcement community took from Kansas City was that preventive patrol worked if it was more aggressive. But the part they missed was that the aggressive patrol was supposed to be confined to places where crime was concentrated. There is something about the idea of coupling, the notion that a stranger's behavior is tightly connected to place and context, that eludes us. It leads us to be indifferent to the suicidal and to send police officers on senseless errands. So what happens when a police officer carries with him that fundamental misconception, and then you add to that the problem of default to truth and transparency? You get Sandra Bland. The style changed. More searches were conducted. They were instructed to disregard their inclination to default to truth and started to imagine the worst. When North Carolina increased their patrolling from 400,000 to 800,000, they found 17 guns with the extra 400,000 stops. Was it worth it? Lawrence Sherman knew of this problem. He believed in medicine's Hippocratic oath, first do no harm, applies equally to law enforcement. He said you have to appreciate that everything police do in some way intrudes on someone's liberty. It's about having a sweet spot of just enough intrusion on liberty and not an iota more. Sherman's 4 officers that worked in District 144 underwent special training. He knew that proactive policing was a legitimacy risk for the police, and he stressed that repeatedly. Even more crucially, that was why the experiment was confined to District 144. That's where the crime was. It was his belief that the more aggressive policing would actually be appreciated in that district by its citizens because of the extreme circumstances they lived under. Overall, it was to make the haystack a little smaller, to make the inevitable trade off between fighting crime and harassing innocent people just a little more manageable. What is required of us is restraint and humility. He said we can put up barriers on bridges to make it more difficult for that momentary impulse to become permanent. Malcolm Gladwell said there are clues to making sense of a stranger, but attending to them requires care and attention. Food for thought. Taking another deep breath in through the belly. As you exhale, slowly start to wiggle your fingers, wiggle your toes, nod your head right to left. Taking another deep breath in through the nose. On that exhale, gently open your eyes. Namaste.